Alright, so right now we're going to talk about asynchronous model versus the synchronous model. So these are both names for ways of handling operations that don't require active work on the part of the currently running thread or process. So usually when people talk about these, they're talking about I/O. So usually you hear asynchronous I/O versus synchronous I/O. So now let's look at a real code example of how this would work in the Mongo shell and in nodejs. So what I didn't mention before is that the Mongo shell is actually synchronous while nodejs is actually asynchronous. So first let's take a look at a script for the Mongo shell. So this is the synchronous model that you probably are more familiar with. So notice that what we do here is we're calling a find1. So you don't have to worry about this right now. But basically what find1 does is just returns one document in the collection call. So notice that we say var doc equals db.call.find1, just like any other function call. And the result is returned by the call to find1. And after this function call returns, we are free to print the result. So now let's take a look at the same script, but in nodejs. So we have some overhead code to connect. This is actually handled automatically in the shell based on functions we pass on the command line, but here it's actually handled as part of the application, so you don't have to worry about this part right now. The main body of the code is right here after the call to find1. So notice that what we do here is we're also doing a find1, just like we were in our synchronous Mongo shell on the collection call. But one difference you might notice is that we're actually not even bothering to check the return value of this call here. What we're doing instead is we're actually passing this callback function. And a common convention in nodejs is for the callback function to take an error as the first parameter and return values as later parameters. In this case, we're kind of ignoring the error and just assuming it worked out. And we're just printing the doc, printing our result. And then this is just more code you don't have to worry about right now. Just closing the database. So what would actually happen here is that we would call db.collection.find1, and this function would immediately return, and we would then get here and print out called find1. And then after we actually make the complete round trip to our database and get a response from MongoDB, we'll print the result and close our database connection. So this callback gets called only after our operation is completely finished. Now this does look more complicated than our script in the Mongo shell, and part of that is just because we have to have this extra code here to connect to MongoDB and this extra code to close the database, which is handled automatically. But part of it is that this asynchronous model may be a little strange at first. But the advantage of this is that this code can actually handle many concurrent operations. For example, if instead we put this in a handler for our web server and tried to get a document each time a user connected, we would be able to handle a large number of users without changing this code. In contrast, the shell would actually block. When it calls find1, it would actually wait for the result to come back, and all other users would have to wait. So in this case, we can just say, register our operation, keep going, register more operations for other users, and handle all of those, and do all of their I/O operations in parallel, whereas in the Mongo shell we actually have to do them completely sequentially. So let's just do a quick example of running this. So to run the script, all you have to do is say mongo script.js. This will connect to the test database by default, and I put in this document earlier with the name MongoDB. Now to run the node application, all you have to do is say node app.js, and that will connect to MongoDB in the test database as we put in our application, and we see we get the same document back, but after we see called find1. Alright, so that's the difference between the asynchronous model and the synchronous model, and I think the Mongo shell environment and the nodejs environment and the differences between them are a good example of the differences between the synchronous model and the asynchronous model.